Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder if your thoughts and feelings are just a passing mood or something more like a symptom? Well, today we're diving into a super interesting study about understanding those tricky inner experiences. This paper is all about creating a new tool, a questionnaire, to help us understand something called psychotic experiences. Now, usually when we think about things like hallucinations or really strong beliefs that aren't based in reality, we think of them as pretty serious and maybe not something that happens all the time. But this study says that these experiences can actually be quite dynamic, meaning they can change a lot from moment to moment. And that is a problem because most of the tools we have for measuring these things ask people to remember what happened over the past month or even their whole life. Imagine trying to understand a roller coaster by only looking at the blurry picture of the whole track. You miss all the ups and downs, the speed changes, and what might be causing them. That is kind of what traditional symptom measures might miss. They don't capture those in the moment shifts. This is where this new tool, called the Momentary Assessment of Psychotic Experiences, or MAPE, comes in. The researchers wanted to create a short questionnaire that people could fill out right now to catch these fleeting experiences. And they wanted it to work for everyone, from people who might have really mild, almost unnoticeable experiences to those who are dealing with more serious symptoms. They noticed that even when researchers use special apps to check in with people throughout the day, which is a method called Ecological Momentary Assessment, or EMA, it is still a bit of a free-for-all. There isn't one standard way to ask about these experiences, making it hard to compare studies. Plus, EMA often means you can only ask a few questions at a time, so you can't cover everything. So their goal was to create that standardized, brief tool that could be used across the board. So how did they build this MAPE? They started with a big list of 56 potential questions. These came from other studies looking at these kinds of experiences and also from ideas that researchers in their own lab came up with. They wanted to cast a wide net. Participants were asked to rate how much they agreed with each statement. Right now, in this moment on a scale from 1 to 7, they then tested this initial list on quite a few people. Waves 1 and 2 involved over 1,000 people each, all from the general community recruited through a platform called Prolific. They then did some statistical magic. Think of it like sorting a huge pile of Lego bricks to see which ones fit together best to build a specific structure. They used something called exploratory factor analysis to figure out how many underlying themes or factors the questions really measured. What they found was super interesting. Instead of a few broad categories, they identified a more detailed 5-factor structure for the questions. This ended up with a much shorter 30-item questionnaire. These 5 factors are unusual thoughts and sensory experiences, a motivation and anhedonia, which means a lack of motivation and pleasure, negative affect paranoia, and social anhedonia, which is specifically the inability to feel pleasure from social interactions. They then ran more tests called confirmatory factor analyses on different groups of people who also recruited through Prolific to make sure this 5-factor structure held up. These later waves confirmed that the 5-factor structure was a good way to describe these experiences. They found excellent model fit with measures saying things like CFI and TLI. Now, these numbers might sound like jargon, but basically, they're like sophisticated fit meters. A high score on these meters means the questionnaire structure matched what they found in the data really well. They also looked at how reliable the scores were, which they checked using something called omega. And the results they found their omegas were mostly above 0.80, which is considered excellent for internal consistency. This means that the questions within each of those 5 factors are strongly related to each other, like a well-knit team reliably measuring that specific aspect of experience. They also looked at how these scores looked in different groups. In the general community samples, the subscales related to positive symptoms like unusual thoughts and paranoia were positively skewed. That makes sense, right? Most people in the general population probably don't experience these things much, so most people would score low. This skewed data, while looking a bit unusual, is actually expected for a measure designed to capture experiences across a wide spectrum. Next, they checked to see if the MAPE was measuring what it was supposed to be measuring. This is called convergent validity. They compared the MAPE scores to other already established questionnaires that measure similar things. For example, they looked at how the MAPE's paranoia subscale related to scores on a well-known paranoia scale, a scale for magical thinking, and how it related to proneness for hallucinations. And the results were pretty positive. The MAPE's unusual thoughts and sensory experiences subscale and the paranoia subscale showed significant positive correlations with these other measures. This means that if someone scored higher on paranoia using another scale, they also tended to score higher on the MAPE's paranoia subscale, which is exactly what you'd want to see. The social anhedonia subscale, as expected, correlated most strongly with a measure of social anhedonia. But what about people who actually have clinical diagnosis of psychotic disorders? They needed to test the MAPE on a clinical sample too. For this, they recruited 73 participants who had a diagnosis of a psychotic disorder. They compared the MAPE scores from this group to standard clinical interviews and scales, like the scale for the assessment of positive symptoms and the scale for the assessment of negative symptoms. Again, the MAPE held up well. The MAPE's unusual thoughts and sensory experiences subscale was significantly correlated with hallucinations and delusions as rated by clinicians. The motivation and anhedonia subscale related to clinician ratings of lack of motivation and anhedonia. And the social anhedonia subscale matched up with clinician ratings of social withdrawal. So, what is the big takeaway from all of this? The researchers believe they've successfully developed and validated the MAPE. It is a brief, reliable, and valid way to measure psychotic experiences as they're happening, across the whole spectrum of whether someone has mild experiences or clinical diagnosis. The key strengths, as they see it, are its focus on the in-the-moment aspect, which cuts down on memory errors and gives a more real-world picture. It is standardized, meaning it can be used consistently across different studies and labs, which is huge for making research more comparable and reproducible. And importantly, it is designed to be used on anyone, bridging the gap between studying subclinical experiences and clinical conditions. They suggest it could be used in labs to see what happens to these experiences, during experiments, or in long-term studies to track changes over time. In clinical settings, it could even be a quick check-in tool for patients. Now, no study is perfect, and it is important to acknowledge the limitations. The clinical sample size was relatively small, so larger studies with people actually experiencing full-blown psychosis are needed to really confirm these findings. They also didn't include disorganized symptoms, which are another part of psychosis, so the MAPE isn't capturing everything. They also haven't tested how stable the scores are over time, which is important if you want to use it to track changes in a person's condition. And finally, all the data was collected online, so it would be good to see if it works as well in in-person assessments. Overall, though, this is a really exciting development. The MAPE seems like a promising new tool for researchers and clinicians interested in how these subtle, and sometimes not so subtle, mental experiences play out in real time. It helps us move beyond just asking, "Have you ever?" and starts asking, "How are you experiencing this right now in this very moment?" Which could unlock a lot of new understanding about the complex world of psychosis. Looking at this research, I think it is a fantastic step towards a more nuanced understanding of these experiences. The ability to capture things in the moment is crucial because, as the researchers point out, these states aren't static. They can fluctuate based on what is happening around you or inside your head. The MAPE's multi-factor structure also shows a sophisticated understanding of how these experiences aren't just one big blob, but have distinct components. The slight overlap between subscales also makes sense, reflecting how these symptoms often co-occur. However, the limitation about not including disorganized symptoms is worth noting. While it is understandable given the difficulty in self-reporting these specific experiences, it means the MAPE won't be a complete assessment for all individuals with psychosis. The small clinical sample size is a standard limitation in early validation studies, but it does mean we need to be a little cautious in generalizing these findings to all clinical populations without further replication. Testing test-retest reliability would also be key for understanding its use in longitudinal tracking. The real potential I see here is in personalized intervention. If we can accurately measure momentary changes, we might be able to identify triggers and develop strategies that are tailored to those specific moments of distress or unusual experience. This could be a powerful tool for both research and therapeutic practice. Imagine a patient using the MAPE app and the data being used by a therapist to help them navigate a difficult day. For future research, I'd love to see the MAP integrated into more intensive EMR studies, perhaps alongside physiological measures to get an even richer picture of these momentary shifts. Also, exploring its use with specific interventions designed to reduce these experiences would be fascinating. Can the MAPE show us if a particular therapy is effectively smoothing out those ups and downs? What do you all think about this new tool? Does this kind of momentary assessment resonate with you? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this breakdown helpful, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more insights into the fascinating world of psychology. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.